My father owned 2 pickup trucks, a fishing boat, and a house with a brick front. And one Tuesday night, I watched him break down at the kitchen table over a payment of $312. I was 9 years old. For years I thought he was crying about money. I was wrong. That night began with a single verse of scripture. 7 words that changed how he saw money for the rest of his life. It is a way of seeing you cannot unsee. This is not a get-rich-quick story. There is no secret account, no clever loophole, no prosperity promise. It is about a quiet lie that most hard-working, God-fearing people believe without ever noticing. The 7 words of Scripture that finally exposed it, and the slow, stubborn freedom that followed. Stay with me. Because the moment he read those 7 words out loud, everything he thought he knew about money fell apart. No hype. No shame. Just the truth my father learned almost too late. And, by grace, just in time. From the outside, we looked like the family that had made it. The brick front house. The truck that still smelled new. The boat everyone on the block admired. My dad worked 6 days a week. And on the 7th, after church, he loaded up and delivered furniture on the side. The neighbors used to say he was the hardest working man on the whole street. They always meant it as a compliment. Looking back now, I think it was a warning that none of us knew how to read. His answer to every problem in life was always the same 3 words. Make more money. More hours. More overtime. More side jobs on the weekend. And on paper, it worked. The number on his paycheck kept climbing, year after year. But he had skipped the question Scripture asks plainly. Before you build, sit down first and count the cost. He never counted. He just kept bailing water out of a boat with a hole in the bottom. And the faster he bailed, the more tired he got, and somehow the water never actually went down. Because every raise came with a bigger payment quietly attached to it. A newer truck. A second credit card. Just for emergencies. The fishing boat he had always wanted, sitting in the driveway like a trophy. Each one felt like a reward for working so hard. Looking back, I understand it now. We did not own our life. We were renting it back from the bank. 1 monthly payment at a time. And we were calling it success. I remember standing next to my mother at the grocery register, watching her quietly hand 2 items back to the cashier so the total would fit whatever was left in the account. When I asked her why, she smiled down at me and said, "We are just fine, honey." Even at that age, I knew we were not fine. But we were very, very good at one thing. We were good at looking fine for everyone else. Then one night, the phone rang in the middle of dinner. I only heard my father's half of it. A long, heavy silence. Then 2 numbers I have never been able to forget. 46,900. That was what we owed the world. He set down his fork and did not pick it up again. But what happened 3 nights later, alone in a dark room with my grandfather, is the part that changed everything. That night, he sat doing the same math in his head until 3 in the morning. It all came to a head on an ordinary Saturday morning. A man I had never seen before pulled slowly into our driveway, clipboard in hand, to take back the newest truck. My father, the hardest working man on the street. stood in his own front yard, in full view of the neighbors, and quietly asked a stranger for 30 more days. I was young, but I understood enough. I had never once seen my father look small. That morning, in that driveway, he did. That evening he sat alone in a dark room. My grandfather, his own father, came in, said nothing, and slid an old, worn Bible across the table. The cover was cracked. The pages were soft from being read 1,000 times. My father said, "I do not need a sermon right now. I need money." My grandfather just tapped the page and said, "Read it." Out loud. So he did. One short line he had read 100 times and never really heard. The borrower is slave to the lender. 7 words. He read it again, slower. The borrower is slave to the lender. The room went completely still. For 3 days, that one word followed him everywhere. Slave. He kept arguing with it in his head. It was not fair, he told himself. He had a good job. He paid his bills. He worked harder than anyone he knew. But slowly, quietly, he began to see it. There is an old line in Scripture that the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and he finally understood what it meant. It was never really about the dollars. Every dollar he owed had a master's name written on it, and none of those names were his. Money was no longer a tool in his hand. It had quietly become his master. He told my mother he was going to sell the new truck. He braced himself for a fight. Instead, she started to cry and said, "I never needed the truck. I needed to stop being afraid every time the phone rang." That was the reframe that changed his life. Debt had not made him rich. It had made him rent his own future back from strangers, one payment at a time. He had been the hardest working slave on the street, and nobody had forced him. He had volunteered, one signature at a time. And if that was true, then freedom was not about earning more. It was about owing less. That single shift is where everything finally began to turn. Something changed in his eyes after that night. For 20 years he had asked the same question every morning. How do I make more money? Now he started asking a very different one. If the earth and everything in it already belongs to God, what am I actually the master of in my own house? It was a smaller question, and somehow a braver one. Because every bigger paycheck he had ever chased had only bought him a slightly bigger, more comfortable cage. The first thing he did was strange, and it cost nothing. He wrote it all down. Every card, every loan, every single dollar. On one long sheet of paper, out in the open, on the kitchen table. Scripture says the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. And for the first time, he actually had a plan he could see. He said you cannot fight an enemy you refuse to look at. So that night, for the first time in years, he looked. Then he did the hard, unglamorous things that nobody ever posts about. He sold the new truck and bought one that was 15 years old and only started on the second try. He dropped the credit card into a bowl of water and froze it solid in a block of ice at the back of the freezer. So using it would cost him an hour of waiting and a moment of honesty. And instead of chasing the biggest debt, he attacked the smallest one first. Paid it off, then rolled that freed up money onto the next, like a snowball gaining weight as it goes. He needed one real win to believe the rest was possible. The first few months were bleak. That Christmas was the humblest one we ever had. Homemade gifts, a small tree. But I remember something else about that winter. For the first time in years, I heard my father sleep through the night. And here is the strange part. Even in the leanest months, while he was clawing his way out of that hole, he insisted on giving off the top. Not a lot, but first, before a single bill was paid. When I asked him why we gave money away when we had so little of it, he said something I have never forgotten. A slave cannot give away his master's money. Only a free man can give. So we give. Every week. To remind ourselves that we are free. Word got around. Neighbors started knocking. Not to borrow any more, but to ask how he had done it. He would pour 2 coffees, open that same worn Bible, and start with 7 words. He never charged a dime for it. It took about 3 years. There was no lottery ticket, no inheritance, no windfall, no secret system. Just 7 words of scripture and 1,000 small, stubborn, unglamorous choices repeated day after day. The afternoon the very last payment cleared, he did not shout or celebrate. He just walked out to the porch, sat down in the fading evening light, and said quietly, almost to himself, "Now, money is a tool again. Not a throne." For the first time in my whole life, my father was a free man. My father passed away a few years ago. The house was paid for. There was no debt for anyone to inherit. But the real inheritance was in a shoebox in his closet. A stack of envelopes, one with each of his grandchildren's names on it. Inside each one, there was no check. Just 7 words in his handwriting. The borrower is slave to the lender. And 1 line beneath it. Owe no one. Then you can help everyone. Grandpa, so let me ask you the same question that saved my family. Not how much you make. Not how much you have. Just this. Right now, are you the owner of your money? Or the borrower? If this stirred something in you, do one quiet thing tonight. Write down everything you owe, and just look at it in the light. Then subscribe and walk this road with us, where biblical wisdom meets your wallet. Because the next story is about the woman who ignored this very verse.